I used to think stories like that belonged to someone else. You know, the messy ones where people walk out, or stay too long, or end up looking at someone they were never supposed to look at that way. I heard the title in my head like a warning, though I didn't know why yet. I refused to believe in my husband, he proved me wrong by leaving. But it wasn't my story. It was hers. I met her at the repair shop I worked at. Nothing glamorous, just oil-stained floors, tools that clanged whenever someone dropped them, and a faint smell of coffee always left too long on the burner. She came in late on a Wednesday, the kind of day where no one's supposed to notice anyone. Her car made a strange sound pulling into the lot, like something rattling loose, but she didn't flinch when she stepped out. She was composed in a way that felt deliberate. Mid-40s, neatly tied hair, a fitted blazer that didn't match the dusty air of the shop. She carried herself like someone who had learned to hide exhaustion beneath control. "Who do I talk to about a noise?" she asked, scanning the space. Her voice was steady, practiced. I almost answered too quickly. "That'd be me," I said, stepping forward before the older guys in the back could. "Show me where you heard it." She tilted her head, studying me in that brief pause where people usually decide if you're capable or not. Her eyes didn't move away as fast as I expected. Then she handed me the keys. I slid into the driver's seat and turned the engine over. The rattle came right away, clear, metallic. "Probably the belt," I said, leaning out the window. I tried not to let it throw me off, but I worked more carefully than usual. Checked bolts twice. Wiped grease from my hands more than I needed to. It wasn't nerves. It was awareness. "Do you always wait in here?" I asked, glancing up. "Depends who's working," she replied. A half smile. Then silence. I didn't know what to do with that answer, so I tightened the belt and focused on the sound of tools against metal. But the quiet stretched between us. It wasn't heavy, not yet, it was something else. She finally broke it. "You look too young to be under a car all day." I wiped my palms on a rag. "And you don't look like someone who lets a car rattle this long." Her smile widened just slightly, then vanished, like it had somewhere better to be. "Maybe we're both pretending." The words slipped past me before I could stop them. "Pretending what?" She didn't answer. She just glanced at the clock on the wall and shifted her weight, like the conversation had been an accident. But the question hung there, between the clatter of tools and the hum of the fluorescent lights. When I finally handed her back the keys, her fingers brushed mine. Not intentional, probably. Still, it lingered, like the faint smell of perfume caught in the air long after someone leaves a room. She thanked me, calm and polite, and walked out as though nothing had happened. But later that night, lying awake in my small apartment, I kept hearing the echo of her unfinished sentence. "Maybe we're both pretending." I didn't know what she meant. I only knew I wasn't going to forget it. It was a Saturday morning, the kind where dust hangs in the air because the sunlight finds every corner it isn't supposed to. I was restocking shelves when I noticed her standing by the counter, waiting. She hadn't rung the bell. Just stood there, hands loosely clasped, as if she wasn't sure she wanted to be seen. "You again," I said before I thought better of it. My voice carried across the empty garage. Her eyes flicked up. "The belt's fine. But there's a light on the dashboard." I wasn't sure if I should ignore it. I walked over, wiping my palms on my coveralls. "Check engine?" She nodded. "It's probably nothing." The way she said it, too quickly, too dismissive, sounded less like certainty and more like a habit. I offered to take a look, and she followed me outside. Her car was clean, almost painfully so. Not the kind of clean that comes from time, but the kind that comes from someone who needs control where they can find it. When I slid into the driver's seat, she leaned against the open door. Close enough that I could see the faint lines around her eyes. They weren't harsh, just honest. Like a map of places she'd been that I couldn't imagine. You seem tired, I said quietly, eyes on the dashboard. She laughed once, not really amused. That obvious? Only if someone's looking. The silence after that was longer than it should have been. She shifted, arms folding like armor. But I caught it, a flicker, a small drop in her shoulders before she straightened again. Long week? I asked. Long life, she replied, too softly, as if she hadn't meant to say it out loud. I didn't push. I just checked the codes, read the blinking light. Nothing urgent, but I explained it anyway, taking more time than I needed. She listened, though I'm not sure she cared about the engine. She nodded at the right parts, but her eyes were elsewhere, far away. When I looked up, I noticed her hands gripping the edge of the car door. Not tight, just steadying herself. Pale knuckles against polished paint. I wondered how often she did that, anchored herself to whatever was closest. You're good at explaining things, she said suddenly. I shrugged. I just don't like people leaving more confused than when they showed up. She smiled faintly, but it didn't last. Must be nice, fixing things you can actually see. I didn't know what to say to that, so I stayed quiet. The hum of the shop, the faint ticking of the cooling engine, filled the gap. When I handed back her keys, she hesitated before taking them. Just a heartbeat too long. Then her fingers brushed mine again, lighter this time, but unmistakable. She pulled away first, straightening her blazer as though nothing had passed between us. Thank you, she said, her tone professional, polite, distant. But as she turned to leave, I noticed the way her hand lingered on the door handle, hesitant, reluctant. Like she wanted to stay, just for another moment. And that hesitation stayed with me long after the sound of her car faded down the street. It was raining the night I saw her again. Not the kind of rain that makes everything clean and soft, but the sharp kind, angled, relentless, hammering against the windows of the shop after hours. I'd stayed late, finishing up paperwork I didn't really need to finish. Truth was, I didn't feel like going home. She walked in just as I was locking up. Umbrella half broken, jacket damp. I blinked, half convinced I'd imagined her. Sorry, she said, pushing wet hair from her face. I know you're closed. The car stalled a few blocks away. I hesitated, then stepped aside. You can wait here until the rain eases. I'll drive you to it. She looked at me for a second, like she was weighing something, then nodded. Inside, the shop felt different with just the two of us. The fluorescents buzzed overhead, too bright for the closeness of the moment. I offered her a towel, which she took, pressing it lightly against her cheeks. For the first time, she looked unguarded. Damp blazer clinging to her shoulders, hands fumbling with the edge of the fabric. You live nearby? I asked, mostly to fill the silence. Used to, she murmured. Then she caught herself, adjusting. Not anymore. That half-sentence hung in the air. I didn't ask what she meant. But I wondered if used to included someone waiting at home, or maybe no one at all. We sat at the counter. I poured us both coffee from the burnt pot, even though it tasted like ash. She cradled the mug with both hands, staring into the steam as though it might give her answers. This place is too quiet, she said finally. You mean tonight? No. I mean for you. Her eyes flicked up. You don't seem like someone who belongs in silence. I didn't know what to do with that. I wanted to tell her I'd been waiting, for what, I didn't even know. But instead I laughed softly, shaking my head. And you do? Her lips parted, like she might say something back, but a vibration cut through the moment. A phone, buzzing against the counter. She reached for it quickly, almost too quickly, and when she saw the name on the screen, her whole posture changed. Stiff, brittle. She silenced the call without answering. Slid the phone face down. I didn't ask. I just noticed her hands trembling slightly before she gripped the mug again. For a moment, I thought she was going to say something. Her eyes found mine, steady but vulnerable in a way I hadn't seen before. My chest tightened, like the air between us wasn't enough. But then she looked away, pulling herself back together. You should drive me to the car before the rain gets worse. I nodded, even though part of me wanted to stay in that silence forever. When she stood, her shoulder brushed mine. Just a fleeting touch. I almost turned toward her. Almost said something reckless. But I didn't. I let the moment pass, left it trembling between us like the rain on the glass. I told myself I wouldn't linger when I dropped off her car, but of course I did. She'd called earlier in the week, something minor with the brakes, and I'd offered to bring it by when I was done. She hesitated before agreeing, like she knew what it meant, but neither of us said it out loud. By the time I parked outside her building, dusk had already swallowed the street. She opened the door before I knocked, as if she'd been standing there, listening for me. You didn't have to bring it yourself, she said softly. I wanted to make sure it was running right. I held out the keys. She took them, her hand brushing mine, but this time neither of us pulled away quickly. The silence stretched. She finally stepped aside. You should come in. Just for a minute. Her apartment was neat, almost too neat, like everything had been placed carefully, deliberately. I sat on the edge of a chair while she poured 2 glasses of water. No music, no television, just the hum of the refrigerator and the faint sound of traffic outside. She set the glass down in front of me, then sat across the room, as far as she could without leaving. You make things complicated, she said suddenly. Not accusing, just stating. I blinked. Me? She let out a small, humorless laugh. I don't even know why I called you. It was a 5-minute repair. Maybe you wanted to talk, I said before I could stop myself. Her eyes narrowed slightly, not in anger but in recognition. Like I'd peeled back something she hadn't meant to show. You don't know what you're saying, she murmured. Then explain it to me. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she stared at the glass of water in her hands, turning it slowly. Her knuckles were pale against the clear rim. Finally, she whispered, "What are we doing?" The words landed heavier than they should have. I swallowed. My throat was dry. I don't know. We sat there, staring at each other, not moving. The kind of silence that doesn't allow escape. Her eyes looked tired but alive in a way that made my chest ache. I wanted to close the distance, but I stayed frozen. She broke first. You shouldn't be here. I nodded, though I didn't stand. I know. Her voice dropped lower, almost breaking. And yet you are. I didn't have an answer. The room felt too small, the air too sharp. Finally, she set the glass down with a soft clink. She looked at me like she was bracing herself for something inevitable, something she'd already lost once before. This is the first time in years, she whispered, that I don't feel invisible. And I don't know if that terrifies me or saves me. The silence after that was louder than anything I could have said. After that night in her apartment, we didn't see each other for almost 2 weeks. Not by plan, but by avoidance, hers, mostly. She stopped bringing the car by. When I called to check in, her voice was polite, clipped. I told myself to leave it alone, but every day felt too quiet without her. It was late one evening when the phone on the shop's counter buzzed. A voicemail, from her. Her tone was steady, but the words trembled underneath. Could you stop by tomorrow? I found something in the glove compartment. I think it belongs to you. It didn't make sense. I hadn't left anything in her car. But the way she said it, like she needed me to come anyway, made sleep impossible that night. The next day, I pulled into her building's lot, and she was already waiting outside. No blazer this time, just a worn sweater and jeans. She looked different, softer somehow, but also more fragile. Without a word, she held out a small envelope. Yellowed at the edges, creased like it had been folded and unfolded too many times. I thought it was yours, she said, voice low. I opened it carefully. Inside was a photograph. Black and white, a little faded, but clear enough. A man, tall, dark-haired, standing next to her, years younger. His smile easy. Her hand in his. "He looks like you," she whispered before I could ask. "That's why I thought," she trailed off, shaking her head. It was stupid. I studied the photo again. The resemblance was there, uncanny. Same jawline, same careless grin. But the man in the picture carried a weight I didn't recognize. "Who is he?" I asked quietly. She didn't answer right away. Her fingers curled around her sleeve, tugging at the loose thread. Finally, she said, "My husband." Before he left. The word husband pressed against me harder than I expected. Not because I didn't know she had one, but because of the way she said it. Like the leaving had been an earthquake she was still living inside. "He walked out 5 years ago," she continued, eyes fixed on the pavement. "One morning, he kissed me goodbye, and by nightfall, half his things were gone. No explanation. Just, gone." I wanted to say something, but my throat felt locked. She laughed softly, bitterly. "And then you show up. Looking like him, standing in the same garage he used to bring the car to. Same tilt of the head, same way you laugh when you don't know what to say. Do you know how cruel that feels?" Her words cut sharper than anger ever could. I wanted to step closer, to tell her I wasn't him, that I never could be. But she turned away, staring at the photograph like it was a wound that hadn't closed. Finally, she pressed the envelope back into my hand. "Take it. I can't keep it anymore." And just like that, she walked inside, leaving me standing in the parking lot with someone else's face staring back at me from the photo. It wasn't mine, but it felt like it was. I didn't go back right away. I carried the photograph in my pocket for days, taking it out only when I was alone. The resemblance was undeniable, but the more I stared at it, the more I saw the differences too. His smile looked certain. Mine never did. When I finally knocked on her door again, it was late. The hallway light flickered above me, buzzing faintly. She opened the door in silence, as if she'd been expecting me all along. For a moment, neither of us spoke. She stepped back, letting me in. The apartment felt smaller this time, not because it was, but because the space between us had nowhere left to hide. I set the envelope on the table. "He's not me," I said quietly. Her eyes flicked to it, then to me. She folded her arms, but it didn't look like armor anymore. It looked like holding herself together. "I know that," she whispered. "But sometimes knowing doesn't matter." We sat down across from each other. The room was dim, just the lamp in the corner casting soft light. I could hear the clock ticking, too loud in the silence. She took a slow breath. "I don't want to need anyone again." I nodded. "And I don't want to be a replacement." Her gaze met mine, steady this time. "Then what are we doing?" The question hung there, heavier than before. I didn't have a clean answer. All I had was the quiet truth pressing at my chest. "Something we probably shouldn't," I said. "But something that feels impossible not to." Her lips parted slightly, as though she might argue. Instead, she let the silence swallow us again. It wasn't uncomfortable this time, it was a strange kind of relief, like finally exhaling after holding your breath too long. Her hand shifted on the table, just barely brushing mine. Not intentional, maybe. But she didn't pull back. I turned my palm up, slowly, and her fingers slid into it. Warm, hesitant. Real. We sat like that for a long while, not looking at our hands but at each other. No declarations, no promises. Just the quiet acknowledgement that whatever this was, it existed. Finally, she leaned forward, resting her forehead against mine. It wasn't a kiss. It wasn't even close. But it was enough to make the room tilt, to make everything else blur. I don't know if I can survive this, she whispered. Then we'll take it one moment at a time, I murmured back. And we stayed there, foreheads pressed together, hands tangled, silence wrapping around us, not as a solution, but as a beginning neither of us had meant to find. I'm telling you this now because time has a way of softening the edges, even the sharp ones. Back then, everything felt jagged, every silence, every glance, every word we didn't say. But looking back, what strikes me isn't the tension. It's the quiet. The way two people who shouldn't have found each other somehow did. She once told me she didn't want to need anyone again. At the time, I thought that meant she was closing a door, shutting me out before I could ever walk through. But now I understand, it wasn't about me. It was about the scar left behind by someone who promised permanence and delivered absence. She wasn't afraid of me, she was afraid of feeling invisible all over again. And me? I thought I was just restless, just searching for something I couldn't name. But she made me realize I wasn't looking for someone to fix me. I was looking for someone who saw me, not the grease under my nails or the fact that I was too young, too unpolished, too uncertain of where I was headed. She looked at me and didn't flinch. That changes a person. Being seen like that, it rewrites you. We never called it love. Not out loud. Maybe because giving it a name would have broken it. Maybe because some things are stronger when they live in the space between words. What I know is this. She taught me that connection isn't always about timing or labels or the clean paths we're told to follow. Sometimes it's about the pause between two sentences, the brush of a hand you can't forget, the silence that feels louder than any declaration. Sometimes it's about what you risk by simply staying in the room. Did we stay together? That's not really the point. What matters is that, for a stretch of time that still lives in me, we sat in the same quiet and decided not to run from it. And that choice, fragile as it was, changed everything. She gave me something I didn't know I was missing, the reminder that even flawed, imperfect, temporary moments can leave you whole. And maybe I gave her the same. So when I think of her now, I don't think of the car or the rain or even the photograph that nearly undid us both. I think of the night she leaned her forehead against mine and whispered that she didn't know if she could survive this. And I think of how, for once in my life, I found the right words, then we'll take it one moment at a time. And sometimes, one moment is enough. Sparkles, if this story made you feel something, let me know in the comments. Would you want more stories like this?